Ladies and gentlemen, the program starts in 1 minute.
Donde todos somos como hermanos, así es Medellín. Medellín, flor de primavera, eres la primera, lo puedo decir. Mi Medellín, Medellín, brillante lucero, tu nombre llegó al mundo entero. Medellín, brillante lucero, tu nombre llegó al mundo entero. Ay, qué feliz me siento cuando escucho a mi gente contar remembranzas que no olvidarán, forman parte de su identidad. Medellín, qué hermoso tú eres, todas tus mujeres son dignas de ti. Medellín, si lejos me encuentro, mi corazón necio se quiere salir. Ven a Medellín, verás que nunca te quieres ir. Valle de Aburrá, capital de la montaña. ¿Qué será que quieres tú? Del que llega aquí se amaña. Ven a Medellín, ven a Medellín.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the afternoon session, Investing in Circular Economy Businesses. We'll discuss today the role of funding and investing in making the transition happen in circular economy. So in addition to the great teams and innovations, obviously funding is greatly important in addition to the collaboration and consumers and customers that we also need in the equation. So first we'll have two speakers, and after that a distinguished panel here today for 1.5 hours. And I would also like to remind you guys that the better the session will be, the more questions you ask. So the questions will be on an iPad that I'll be moderating, and then after each of the speaker sessions and the panel, I'll take few questions from the audience and we'll cover those. My name is Tiina Tsiliakus. I'm an entrepreneur and business angel, and I'll be the moderator here today. So without further ado, I would like to invite Jamie Butterworth to the stage from Circularity Capital. So give it up in the afternoon for Jamie.
Thanks. Good afternoon, everybody. So I want to tell you a story about setting up Circularity Capital and also share some thoughts and observations about this topic around finance and the circular economy when we're going to hand you over to a fantastic panel of practitioners who are going to talk to you about that. Before I begin, though, I just want to do a bit of a poll and work out who we've actually got in the room and where you guys are all from, what kind of areas. So if you are in the world of investment, could you put your hand up, please? People on the front row, come on, guys, put your hands up. Anyone else? Yeah. From kind of SMEs, small, medium-sized enterprises, private businesses? Good number there, yeah. Big corporate businesses? Corporates, yeah, quite a few. Governments, cities, supranational organizations, and other people who I don't, academic researchers, other people, lots. Good, okay. So I know who we've got in the room now, that's fantastic. Right, I will try and tailor the story to the audience to some extent. So back in about 2009, I was lucky enough to be working with a lady called Ellen MacArthur, who'd recently broken the round-the-world record as the fastest person ever to circumnavigate the globe, and a couple of other very interesting people, two of whom I think are somewhere in this room, but it's very big. And we were trying to kind of answer the question around how we will enable human economic development, but at the same time decouple our growth from resource constraints. And at the time, we had read a number of different interesting studies, including the work of Michael Braungart and William Madonna in Cradle to Cradle. We'd read Industrial Ecology by Emery Lovins. We'd also read Walter Stahl's book about the performance economy, and we'd read Janine Benyus's book about biomimicry. And we were fascinated by the idea that the type of economy that was described was going beyond linear efficiency. It was going beyond trying to use less to kind of make more within this take, make, dispose economy. And it was starting to form an economy that is truly restorative by design. But there was one question that we couldn't quite answer, and that was, does it actually make money? So we ended up working together with a group of corporate businesses and with McKinsey to commission a study to look at how the circular economy creates money. And we looked at medium-lived complex goods within Europe, and we took the findings of that report to the World Economic Forum in 2011. And I think sometimes things are about timing as well. And just to put this in context, in around about 2011, it was becoming evident in the economy that a century's worth of gradual price declines in resources were erased in that kind of decade starting from around 2009, 10, 11. So companies were really hurting from an inflection point in the cost of resources, and they were kind of open to, I think, different thinking around economic models. And that led that report and that launch at the World Economic Forum. We did it in a kind of ambush-style marketing event in a small hotel down the road from the main conference center because we couldn't get invited in at the time. And it captured the imagination of a number of CEOs, and by the next year, it was a main topic of the World Economic Forum. And on the back of that, we were able to set up something called, hang on one second. We were able to set up something called the Circular Economy 100. And the idea behind that was very simple. It was that a network of businesses all trying to solve the same problem, connected to government institutions, financiers, etc., would find it easier than individuals alone. And during that period of time, we became exposed to lots and lots of different businesses, from large-scale corporate businesses right the way through to small, medium-sized companies. And after about 5 years of working at the Ellen MacArthur Foundation and seeing lots of those small, medium-sized businesses, I became convinced that there was an opportunity to create a specialist fund that would support the growth and innovation of those kind of companies and provide them not just the capital that they needed, but also the connection to the corporate network and the connection to the kind of insight that they required, sitting on the board of those companies as they were trying to grow. So that led to a period of about 3 years of learning a lot about the world of investment. And one of those things is that it's quite difficult to create a new product in the world of investment because most things are done on previous track record. So we spent a long time building a team that had a track record in making investments in small, medium-sized businesses in kind of adjacent industry sectors effectively. And we went into the market to raise a 50 million sterling fund with a 60 million pound hard cap. And we got to the hard cap at the end of last year, so at the end of 2018. And we raised the money from private investors, so no public bodies, from insurance companies, pension funds, family offices, high net worths, etc. Now, to talk about kind of what we focus on, so we spent a long time looking at businesses in this space, kind of mapping out what does the circular economy SME ecosystem look like. And we identified 5 types of businesses that we think are particularly interesting. The first we would call waste to product, so companies transforming what is currently waste today into valuable commodities and resources and products. Product to product, more around recycling, remanufacturing, repair. Circular business models, plethora of opportunities here. I'll talk about one in a minute, but really beginning to move towards selling performance rather than product. And then data and design, so the use of data to identify untapped value, and design, and that can be anything from materials design, packaging design, where we're starting to create superior products within the market. And our particular focus is to invest in growth stage businesses within the European SME ecosystem, where we can invest around 1 to 9 million sterling to support their growth. And in every instance we do this, we will take a position on the board of the company to support their growth. And that's kind of a very important part of our strategy, is to play a really proactive role in helping those companies to grow. Now, there's one bit, I just got a text actually before I came on from one of my colleagues, to say one point that I think is interesting to kind of cover, which is, so we have decided to go in at a growth stage. Why have we done that? The reason we've done that is we believe that it is really important that we're able to generate a financial return alongside a measurable non-financial impact. So there are a number of instruments in the market that will be putting subsidized or kind of grant capital into very early stage companies within the circular economy, which I think is extremely important. And there is also probably a product which larger institutional investors are going to find interesting to deploy large amounts of capital into. And our view is that at a growth stage, you're starting to find businesses where they've proven the solution and the technology, and they've begun to prove the commercial traction. So this is a point at which we can get large-scale institutional capital to flow into the circular economy. And one of the key points, one of the worst things that we believe we could do, is to create a specialist circular economy fund that doesn't deliver that. So for us, we are very picky and selective in trying to identify those opportunities that have a financial return alongside the measurable non-financial impact. And I want to just briefly talk you through 2 companies that we've invested in, and then a couple of thoughts on kind of what's happened in the last 8 years to lead into the next panel. So we invested last year in a business in Germany called Grover. So Grover provides consumer electronics as a service. You never own the product, you subscribe to Grover, and they provide cameras, mobile phones, laptops, mobility. They've just launched Grover Go, which is a mobility solution. What happens is you subscribe to Grover. You either do that through the app or when you go into a MediaMarkt or Conrad store in Germany. You get hold of the product, you use the product for as long as you wish to use it for. When you've finished, it goes back to Grover. It gets refurbished into identical to new condition, repackaged, and goes out to 2, 3, 4 customers before ultimately it gets sold into a secondary tier market. So effectively what they're doing is getting a very high return on assets using the same product, so kind of product as a service model. Company is growing very quickly at the moment. They are expanding from Germany into Austria and shortly into Spain. And they're also expanding the number and types of products that they can put on the platform. The other thing that they do, in addition to providing products to consumers, is Grover can be used as a white label solution for corporates to deploy their product as a service. So Chibo the coffee machine manufacturer, use Grover to sell Chibo products as a service to their customers. Second business called Winnow, who are using data. So about a third of all food in the world is wasted. And Winnow focuses on this particular issue. What it does is it has a solution where a camera sits above a bin in a large catering facility, and every time food waste is dropped into that bin, the camera and the scales beneath it are able to identify what that food waste is. It has a artificial intelligence algorithm that identifies the food waste and learns using all the connected systems in all the different businesses that are using this. And it builds up a picture. That picture there that you're looking at are meatballs in IKEA. So Winnow is rolling out to 50% of all the IKEA stores in the world. We joke a lot that Winnow, the system, knows a lot about meatballs. What it can then do is provide the chef with a printout of exactly what was wasted on any particular day and where that came from in the process and how much that was worth. There are 1,200 Winnow systems around the world at the moment, and on average, they're reducing food waste by more than 50% across all those sites. In addition to that, in a facility of the scale in which you put Winnow into, which tends to be about $200,000 of food waste a year, it tends to double the profitability of one of those sites that are operating on a single-digit margin. So it has a very quick payback time. In terms of those systems in the market, 1,300 systems at the moment are saving 23 million meals from being wasted every year at the moment. And the company is expanding to a range of hotel chains, cruise ships, large restaurant facilities, etc. So I think it's a good example of the use of data in the food waste. So just some thoughts very briefly on the kind of last part of this. So firstly, what's happened since 2008? I think there's been an increase in awareness. We're seeing more people interested in this topic, and that's evidenced by today. I think we're also beginning to see more and more innovation, partly driven by interactions of people like Citra, who are starting to put together programs that are helping earlier stage companies become investable. We're also seeing more and more financial actors. Just in the last 2 weeks, we've seen Philips launch a really interesting innovation bond specifically to support R&D around the circular economy within their business. We've seen BNP Paribas launch a circular economy ETF. We're seeing more things. We are also beginning to see some more work on internalizing those externalities in the economy. And I would give my example of that would be, we've got a kind of soil at the moment that we can grow things in, but it isn't as fertile as it could be. If we start to do some of the things that people are talking about now around plastic packaging, extended producer responsibility, pricing in things like carbon appropriately, we will supercharge this process effectively. And the last thing I wanted to mention was impact investing. And some of you will be aware of this in the financial community. It is a big thing at the moment. We've got they believe there's about $228 billion of money in impact investing now, where people are seeking a financial return alongside measurable social and financial impact. And that's estimated to be growing at around 13% a year at the moment, compound annual growth. So there are more large-scale institutional investors moving from excluding stocks like armaments, tobacco, pornography, into saying now we actually want to focus into an area where we can generate a return and have a positive benefit as well. And I think that timing is crucial, and we need to link up the circular economy with that impact investing wave. I will leave it at that and go into questions.
Okay, I have actually a few very interesting questions for you. So first on the metrics. So when you look at the growth stage company, what type of business metrics you look at, and what about the impact metrics? So how would you kind of describe to the audience?
Yeah, so I think it would completely depend on the particular business. And in fact, if you look at those waste product, etc., they tend to have different characteristics. If you look at the two companies that we have invested in, the first one, Winnow, that is a recurring revenue thing. So effectively, it's the number of systems deployed, and each of those customers is paying a monthly fee to implement the Winnow system. They're benefiting from the food waste saving. So we want to see how many sites have we got out there and how much ARR is that generating. From an impact perspective, it's very simple. They're logging the number of tons of food waste, which we can then translate into tons of carbon and also water and associated other externalities. And then for someone like Grover, slightly more complex, what we actually look at with Grover is we look at their product mix, and we look at constant use products and intermittent use products. And we say a constant use product doesn't really make that much difference if it's rented on a subscription basis, whereas if it's an intermittent use product, then ultimately we're improving the utilization of the asset. So we'd use a metric around that to look at that side of things.
Okay.
And then on the Grover one, we'd also be looking at return on asset. So we've got an asset. We actually get quite a poor return on asset on a normal mobile phone because we sell it to one person. And then if we recycle it, we capture less than half of 1%. Whereas if we can sell it to another person, we capture 50%. If we can sell it to 5 people like Grover, we get a super high return on the asset.
Okay, so how would you actually then compare the price if you buy it kind of normally versus product as a service and the lifetime value that the company gets, if you compare the two?
So with the Grover model, you would pay a premium to have the flexibility, but ultimately, if you end up buying the product, you only pay €1 more. So that's their offering is basically you are subscribing to have the access. You can actually now have a Grover access model, which allows you to swap and choose between different products, and you just pay a monthly fee, and all of it goes back and gets refurbished and goes out to more customers.
Okay, excellent. Lovely. Thank you so much, Jamie.
Thank you.
Give a big hand to the guy. So next, please welcome Jyri Arponen from Finnish Innovation Fund, Sitra.
The clicker.
And the clicker for Jyri.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. Yes, I'm Jyri Arponen, and I work with these companies that were just mentioned. Been doing that for 25 years, actually, and within the circular economy, last 10 years almost. But last 3 years, I've been working with manufacturing industry. And as we heard, circular economy has gone up in a pace. But there is an danger that our SMEs will be left behind. Because the question has been, for me always, that what is there besides the closing the loop and circulation of side stream or turning the waste to something beneficial? Where is the new businesses? And within last 3 years, the change has been tremendous towards these new business models. And we have a lot of examples how the manufacturing industry is changing. But in order to help SMEs, we created this, somebody has changed the slide much better. The other ones won't be this good. So I have this, we created the circular playbook. So that helps you. It's a tool for companies to change their business from production towards your customer, from linear to circulate. And it's these business models actually who makes it the linear companies' processes and functions to be circular. And there are some players, important players, to do that. And investors are asking me, where is these companies that actually generate positive cash flow? So I can also point out where you can find these sort of unicorns within the circular economy as well. And there are newcomers, and you can find some of these companies already are there in top, is it 100 most interesting companies within circular economy that Sitra runs. So the change has come with this technology actually. We have 3 key drivers for companies to turn their businesses to circular. One is, of course, the sustainability. The other one is customer. But you can do these much better with digitalization. You have metrics, you can optimize, you can have a predictive maintenance, you can have shared platforms, and so on and so on. So this change has been very, very quick, and many companies are actually turning their businesses towards circular. And here are some big examples. And these are actually companies who have already embedded the circularity within their strategy, as we heard Philips yesterday, and into the operational model. So all operations are run with the circularity. One of my favorite companies, which we did also a workshop with, is Nokia Networks. And Pia Tanskanen, I don't know if Pia is here, but she's very good sustainable director, or is she vice president on that. But she doesn't only know the sustainability side. She knows all the functions within the corporation. And that's the way it should be. It shouldn't be just the one person's responsibility to look for the sustainability in ecological side. You have to take considerations also to the people and money side. Then it's sustainable for all the players in the circular economy. And these are the business models that makes the difference. Of course, mainly all companies are having something to do on the left-hand side, and many are also extending the product life of their products instead of having a very short period and having also afterlife for the product and put it back to circulation in some extent. But the sharing platforms and product as a service, those are the ones which actually brings you also revenue, new growth for the company, not just on the EBIT side. And this is how the trick is done. You can see the old linear model, which still exists there, but it's this business model who actually make the change. And those ones which are upper there, sharing platforms and product as a service, those are the ones which generate also new revenue. And so this is usually the question I get, and it's not only anymore about the EBIT, it's also about the revenue. And what is also missing in many actually Finnish companies, they should also define their brand, thinking what is the role in their mission and in their brand values. What is their passion? Is it the passion that your customers share? Is it where are you best at? And lastly, what generates your economic engine? If you don't answer any of these three questions, sustainability or circularity, you're out of business in very soon. ABB guys here in Helsinki said to me, within 5 years, if we don't make these changes in all our operations, we will be soon out of business. And yeah, early movers are already there, so can you afford not to start to doing this? And a very easy trick is to download the playbook. It's called circularplaybook.fi. It's very important also for me because it's in my balance scorecard. So, but this is not all. These are also redefining the ecosystems. And this is not the science fiction. This is actually the model of BMW. And what is the starting point? It's not anymore the raw material, it's you. You are there in the middle in the use phase. And there the most important thing is the sharing platforms. They have the Drive now, which is actually here in Helsinki. Of course, there are many others. And the second one opinion is you can have the car as a service as well. And then the maintenance and all the other circular loops are there, very, very important. And the production is actually in the outer loop, not anymore saying that we are the best product, we have the best production, but we love our clients and end users. That becomes the value of the companies, also in manufacturing industry. They want to have you, they want to have IPRs and R&D, and then they have a platform where everything is functioned. And this is nice. This is circular economy math, and you can see it's just a tip of the iceberg, the new revenue. You also get much more from on the left-hand side, as you can see, and a huge potential within this. So instead of just having one sale-off, you have many revenue streams within these companies. And where do you find these? So some of these companies may still stay linear, although they have spin-off and such things coming on, new type of business models. But then you have these actually, and I think that these are the ones which you are seeking, these actual circular business providers, like sharing platforms, and then enabling businesses, like software companies, like consulting companies who have a specific knowledge on this, and also the sharing platforms. And you can have these companies in all industries, actually. And very quickly about this. So where to invest? Of course, this sharing platform, the risk is high, and also the investment is very high. But of course, the expectation of the return is very big. And the other ones is more incremental investment. And if you start to do product as a service, you need to have a bigger balance sheet, so you need equity for that. So you get more customer value, you get attraction from the investors, and also you have a better purpose for your company, and That's what people love. And you can have this online immediately, and remember to download it right now. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you, Jyri.
8 minutes.
And Jyri doesn't get any question time because he's a representative of Sitra. So you can come to the stand to talk more with Jyri. Next, I would like to invite the panelists to the stage. So Juha Koponen, Ditte Lysgaard, Max Tellini, Aaron Ratner, and Lisbeth Hovarts. Did it go right, approximately? I think the Dutch names are always difficult for me. Anyway, each of the panelists will have 5 minutes first, and then we'll have question time. So, keep shooting the questions through the app, and we can also take questions from the other panelists. But let's start with you, Lisbeth, please. Few words on investing in Europe.
Thank you very much for the introduction. So yes, 5 minutes on Europe as a frontrunner in circular economy financing. Something that the European Investment Bank, that's where I'm working for, is definitely wanting to achieve. It's something that we want to support. If you don't know the European Investment Bank yet, I would like to invite you over to our stand for coffee so that we can talk a little bit more on what we do and how we can maybe support you. Of course, it's obvious why we should be investing in circular economy, and the previous speakers have pointed it out. And as the European Investment Bank, we are supporting projects that are supporting European policy objectives, and the European Commission since 2015 has set out the circular economy strategy with more than 50 action points and quite ambitious targets. But to achieve these targets, we will need a lot of investment. And as our VP yesterday mentioned, over 300 billion will be needed until 2025 to put us on the track towards making the European economy more circular. So you would say more investment, more lending opportunity, but as we know, life is a little bit harder than that. And as an investor, we are a bank and we want to see our money back. So the first thing that we do is look at what are the risks that we see for the projects. How risky will it be that we don't get our money back? And with circular economy comes a lot of innovation, technological innovation. We see new business models, developing new products. They are launched in new markets. We don't know really how customers will react to it. It creates a lot of uncertainty as a banker. And we translate, if we are not sure, then it's risky. And risky ends up being very costly for you to get financing. So what is then the solution? The solution we see is also an integrated one, where a bank is not only delivering you money, but is also going to assist you in developing a much stronger business model. We have the knowledge, we know what we require from you, so we can help you along the way to develop a better business case. We can also help you in setting up corporations that are needed. Circular economy is also about getting other collaborations within the value chain. We know who valuable partners are. We have them in our portfolio, so we can help you with the networking. Another point is that we as investors also need to look at our own business model and how we assess these projects, because it's all about assessing the risk of the project that will end up determining how costly your finance will be. But at the moment, we are looking at this from a very linear perspective. Our risk assessment model is not yet adapted to the circular economy. We are not including the circular benefits that have been presented here and have been shown in a number of cases. And this is something that we need to do. And then we create a level playing field, and then you can be green, circular, or whatever, but then every business will be assessed in the same way. And then, on the other hand, to also assist in de-risking the projects is to develop dedicated circular economy financing tools. If we do that, then your circular businesses know where to get the finance, as well as in de-risking, we can combine public funds, like guarantees from the European Commission, and we combine that with private investment. And with the guarantees, a part of the risk is already taken, like with the grants from the European Commission, they take part of the risk, so more investors are interested in financing the circular economy. And then last but not least, the European Commission has set up an expert group on circular economy financing and trying to point out what are the barriers and what are the recommendations to boost investment in circular economy. And they came up with these 4 recommendations for the financial sector. They also did it for companies as well as for governments. And this could be maybe interesting as a starting point for discussion later on.
Thank you. Okay, let's give it up for Lisbeth. I think we have a few questions for you. First, I would actually like to ask that, what's a sort of an ideal project? So, in an ideal world, what would an applicant and a project look like from European Investment Bank's point of view?
Well, for the European Investment Bank, if we would finance them, it should be a big project. So we like to have 15+ million. We like to see, of course, already revenues, so that we can understand how the business works and where the revenues will come from. Or we have to have very likely estimations on these revenues. So that's very important for us. We need to have clarity in terms of who your suppliers will be. How certain will it that you will get the raw materials on which you produce with which you produce your products. And on the other side, of course, we want to see interested customers. We need to see contracts.
Okay, very good criteria if someone here is thinking about applying for investment. Okay, do we have questions from other panelists for Lisbeth? Otherwise, I'll shoot from the pad, but okay, not at this point. So then we had a question on insurance versus financing companies for circular and sharing business models. So meaning that when you kind of have platforms that have goods that are shared and how they are insured and how they are financed, how do you see kind of that role? Do you have some ideas on that thought?
On sharing platforms?
Yeah, so...
Well, we haven't been financing them.
Okay,
so
not at all.
Not at, yeah,
okay.
we have done it in the past, only once, so it's quite new for us to do that. But maybe the others have experience.
Anyone else comment on that one? Or on kind of consumer insurance, when something gets broken, like the Grover example that we had in Jamie's presentation?
Well, I believe that, from the financial perspective, of course, what from us would be interesting is to have a value chain kind of approach in risk evaluation. And so again, supply chain finance here is key in understanding how the dynamics could be changed. And so this is something which, of course, has to be developed. We have been working on it, but I think that financial industry has a sort of a great interest in digging a little bit more on the complexity of how supply chain is today, how could be actually transformed into a circular way of thinking.
Okay. Ditte?
I think it also speaks a lot to this is maybe not, the need for, if we are to scale the circular economy, the infrastructure and the enablers of a circular economy is actually the key. So rather, insurance may seem like a somewhat not that fascinating industry. It's actually a huge importance if we are to really do that at scale. So from that point of view, I think there's slow movement within the industry, really starting to look at the circular economy business potential, but way more could be happening from that perspective. So it would be a great opportunity for circular business and investing, as I see it.
Yeah, what I see with working with the consumers is that they expect to get everything if it doesn't work, it needs to get returned and fixed. And then there needs to be the business model for somebody to actually do that. Otherwise, it just doesn't work.
Okay, let's get back to that consumer thing when you have your chance. I would still actually ask Lisbeth, so you said 50 million euros ideal project size and the parameters and stuff like that. So can you tell some examples, or is it classified information? What types of projects have you funded during last year?
It goes from bigger industries that move to the recovery types of model. They have a waste stream that they now see being valuable for somebody else to be using. To innovative companies. We recently signed a contract with Orbital, who has developed a shower that is able to reduce the water consumption with 90%, and also energy is less. So it goes from small, more innovative companies to very big companies. It can be in between anything. We finance from the basic research that leads up to a new product, up to the development and the production of it.
Okay, excellent. So thank you, Lisbeth. And next, I would like to invite Ditte. Your 5 minutes.
Yes.
And please shoot the questions for Ditte, so I can use them as well.
Thank you all for having me. I thought I'd take this opportunity to go a little bit into the why. So we've had great speakers talk about how to do circular economy investment and what it is, but I would like to just take a few minutes to touch upon why is it actually that we should do it? Why is it that I have chosen to spend both my time, my career, my portfolio, dedicating that to circular economy? So essentially, the world as we know it is run by production that leads to consumption, and consumption that leads to growth. None of that is actually bad per se. The problem lies within the system, the linear way of thinking, where consumption and growth leads to externalities, to waste. Why we should invest in circular economy is because essentially it enables us to take that mega problem and turning it into a grand opportunity of making business and climate prerequisites rather than opposites that we see today. So when looking for circular economy business opportunities, when looking for circular economy investments, what we should be seeing, what we should be believing is the vision that we can imagine a world where we don't have resource scarcity, where the way you and I consume doesn't have a negative impact on our nature and our climate, and where waste does not exist, and certainly not to the current degree of an almost abundant resource available for us to use. As mentioned, I'm Ditte. I have the great pleasure of working with circular economy businesses in a numerous way. I normally run Linear the Circular Way and work from a business perspective on how to drive revenue through circular economy businesses, as well as our upcycled production line of resource recovery. And last but not least, advise developers on how they can build with circularity in mind and how that can actually be turned into a profitable way. Alongside that, I have an investment arm where I do the circular economy investing myself. So a numerous of hats, all allowing me to see that there is in fact great opportunity within the circular economy. We're still in the very, very early stages. So it's really about finding those sweet spots at the moment, and then looking towards the ecosystem where we need more innovation and a different type of soft funding in order to really get going on the more sort of grander circular economy schemes. But essentially what it looks like is this: designing for circularity being the absolute core, with resource innovations taking the center stage. And really looking at how is it that with circular economy as the tool, we can actually deliver on prosperity and job creation while delivering value for the consumers all at once. It looks a little bit like this, because essentially that is what circular economy is all about. Decoupling value and growth from the use of virgin resources and emissions. So really finding that sweet spot where we do in fact make business and climate prerequisites. We call it value innovation, really leveraging digitalization, design, and circular economies as 3 drivers to really enable that change. And I think if we look at circular economy and scaling circular economy at large, those are the 3 key drivers to look for in a business model. That they have circular economy at core, that they have a use and are enabled by digitalization, and that they're designed for circularity and that they utilize design as a key. That's the way to go towards this, where we're not just doing responsible business of less bad, but actually doing regenerative business. I'll go quickly through this. This is another way of highlighting that it is in fact possible to decouple growth and value from emissions and materials. What we try to do is design the world of tomorrow with the waste of today, while working towards designing a world without waste. And those are the lenses in which we see the business opportunity through. Highlight the 2 keys that for me are essential at the moment: resource recovery, taking all that waste we saw from the dump site and turning it into new materials, such as here for the built environment, and designing for circularity, such as this, our Danish design guide for the plastic industry, and how to really design products in a new way. That was it for me. If you want to know more, check out our book. It's available for free.
Excellent. So what thoughts on the panel side from Ditte's points? Juha.
Well, I'm coming from the pre-owned clothing, so I would really like to see many of the products being designed as you just described. We are seeing some leading brands which already are doing that, but big bulk of them are not.
I think we have to look at this sort of like the theory of change in that sense that we will have a few that are kind of, raising the ceiling or really pushing their boundaries. And then we at the same time need to, which we are seeing more and more, that there is also this, we're raising the floor at the same time and we keep moving together. But I think that's the only way it's going to happen, because we have so many large brands within numerous of industries who are just so, who have such a difficult time with risk that they're not going to be able to transform before there's really a very clear case. So having that kind of mix of the two, and I think that's also where we see a lot of the big businesses are not, they're not driving overall grand change when you look at the entire business. They're doing these smaller pilots that hopefully will then help them leapfrog to bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger rather than going all at once, if that makes sense.
Yep.
Anything else from the panelists? Okay, so then one from the audience. So this is a good question. So where are we doing the best job in reaching and making the circular economy happen? So kind of industry-wise or company-wise, business-wise, startup-wise, whatever comes to mind. So
what I see is that within the built environment, there's just an almost unreachable amount of potential. One, because the built environment has such a negative impact as it is, but also because the built environment serves as a great platform for opportunity because scale is so large. And while built materials are complex, they're not as complex as other industries. So what we see right now, we're doing, we're taking built material, we are upcycling concrete and bricks and windows and wood. So that's coming from the built environment, going into the staying in the built environment, but also taking textiles and plastic composites and turning them from a waste stream to another industry to a built material, because the built material, due to the level of complexity and the scale, actually enables that type of business. So you can almost imagine that the built environment becomes these material banks for waste streams from elsewhere.
Okay, so what would be then your second choice? If the built environment would be the choice number one, what would be the industry number two?
Industry number two, I think we really need to look at our clothing and our textile industry, one for the sort of direct impact, but also because it is an opportunity to reach a lot of consumers and to talk to a lot of consumers and to engage with a lot of consumers. If we really leverage design, not just from a process and product, but also very much a business model perspective of really, can we through that industry really showcase the individual consumer that by, you know, whether it's product as a service, that you can actually get better clothing and you actually, you know, you create greater value for the individual consumer through there.
Okay, so built environment and then clothing, you'd say?
Yeah.
Okay. This is a good one. We're all convinced about the potential, it seems. So why is it that the transition is not faster? Does the finance reach the businesses, and if not, why not? What's the key barrier?
I think there are several barriers. I think there's the infrastructure barrier that is very present, that this is doing something differently, and as doing something differently, it is difficult. And it does take, innovation takes more resources at the present. So that being that we simply just need to accelerate all of the infrastructure happening more and more and really grow the market. It's not a market to take, it's a market to grow. The other thing being culture, the cultural barriers and the need for education in terms of really just finding that we need to do things differently. Particularly, one thing is on the consumer side, but for me what I'm super interested in is on the professional side, that we need, it's a matter of skills and it's a matter of mindset and really seeing those opportunities. Teaching whomever is designing, the design guide is an example, right? Whether you're the designer or you're the person procuring, what does it actually mean to procure for circularity? It's not an easy question, so really helping people figure that out is of huge importance, and empowering the circular consumption essentially.
Yeah, exactly. So I always struggle, both with consumers as well as with professionals on this behavior change, and how to be as collaborative and open and inviting everyone to participate, which means more work basically in every project. But still, if people have participated, it's harder to leave. So I completely agree on that point. Okay, thank you, Ditte. Next we have Max. Applause for Ditte.
So, good afternoon, everybody. It's a great pleasure, of course, to be with you and sharing what is the commitment of Intesa Sanpaolo, the leading Italian bank, on the topic of circular economy. We are doing this from the innovation center of the company, which is actually devoted to spot the future trends. And we can, of course, be proud of sharing with our clients that, of course, this is not just a trend. This is actually a reality. Just to build on what has been said right now, we believe that this is really a sort of cultural shift which is needed in order to implement and enable the transition that would lead to the benefits. And again, from a sort of paradoxical kind of approach, if we are, assuming that we are using a plastic bottle, once we finish to use it and we trash this into the recyclable plastic, we tend to see this as a sustainable approach. However, if we redesign the bottle, we tend to see this as a circular. So this is the difference that we want to somehow push in terms of conceptual understanding if we are serious enough in terms of what the impact is expected from business to shift the mindset and to shift the way how finance can perceive the newity and the innovation that is behind a company and the transition to becoming a more circular enterprise. Why a financial institution like ours is busy with circular economy? We became financial service global partner of the Ellen MacArthur Foundation back in 2016, and we do have a vision, which is, of course, for us, is to create the condition, at least for the Italian economy, to have the circular economy as the vision. So we want to make sure that our entrepreneurs in the food, in the fashion, and in the automotive sector, and many others, key sectors of the Italian economy, are able to lead the transition, because the Made in Italy of the future would be a circular one. And so in order to do so, we are creating a platform of engagement with the Circular Economy Lab in Milan, where we want to have the open innovation approach, where companies and startups can work together, and we need to understand what they're doing, and we need to support them with financing. We are the first impact bank. We try to set up a very ambitious goal. On the 28th of January, our CEO hosted in Milan a specific event with the CEO of BlackRock and the CEO of the El Mercato Foundation. Intesa Sanpaolo is committed to the circular economy in terms of spotting the opportunities, but even more so, to understand how maybe the riskiness of the linear economy could be mitigated. So for us, it's a matter of de-risking somehow the complexity of the linear economy, which many times could be seen as underlying factor for some bad performances in the economy. So we have been starting our journey asking ourselves, what does it mean for us? Intesa Sanpaolo is one of the most sustainable financial institutions globally. What does it mean for us to be a so sustainable financial institution dealing perhaps with not so sustainable clients? And that triggered the information about we don't want to have just corporate social responsibility. We want to push it a little bit forward. So rather than having a sort of watchdog, we wanted to have a truffle dog. And this is where we do see a circular economy. We do see an approach where customers can lead the transition and we can support them understanding the financial implication of what linear business models are and how circular can actually address the solutions. So we set up the Circular Economy Lab in Milan. Last week, Milan just joined the El Mercato Foundation as the first city in Italy to lead the transition. So again, we believe in business activation and open innovation, but we want to make sure that the financial institutions are seen as platforms for habilitation and for basically sharing of what the best practices are. I can share that even yesterday some discussions were about metrics and how we evaluate and how we want to somehow disseminate this common culture, what circular is, what the definitions are, and how metrics can help the financing of the circular economy. We may need a sort of unified approach, a global one, but this is the transition that we are encompassing. And in doing so, of course, we set up a very ambitious goal. We put forward 5 billion credit euro plafond. It's money which we are granting at the very best conditions. We are looking for transformative projects, not just sustainable ones. We are financing projects across Italy. We do have a value chain approach. We do see the importance of this topic, but we push for collaboration across sectors and across players in order to trigger this transition. I'm done, and of course, if you have other questions, we are open for business. Thank you very much.
First, any questions from the panelists on the offering? Aaron.
As a lender in the industry, how do you think about underwriting risk when you're moving into new economies and new industries?
It's a matter of first understanding the counterparty risk, and then we want to make sure that it's appreciation about what is the value that is at stake. We have been looking at the transaction in the real estate sector, and we believe that this is the difference between sustainable finance and circular finance. When we look at, for example, an elevator, which has been sold by an asset, rather than used as a service, you have a different shift in the cash flow, you have a stabilization of the cash flow, and you have a sort of extension of lifetime. This is going to change the risk profile of the transaction, and we need to assess how this risk can be rewarded in the longer term. And again, in terms of metrics, and in terms of the impact that the circular is expected to give, I tend to believe that we need also to focus on the macro kind of economics of those factors, because, for example, whatever amount we grant in a linear economy, the same amount in the circular could have a different kind of approach, a different scale of impact.
I had a question. So you mentioned credit offering. Is there, and there was a mention about the equity-based offerings. So you mentioned the credit offering, and there was, if I saw correctly, also equity offering. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yes, of course. I mean, in the strategic plan of Intesa Sanpaolo, we set up the goal of having a credit plafond, which is the 5 billion euros, and then we are working to set up an investment fund in the circular economy. This is again back to how we want to support the newity of this process, but also supporting the Italian entrepreneurs in becoming ambassadors of this new economy. And so we are supporting startups. We are making sure that, of course, we do assess the risk of startups, and by nature, banks could not actually be easy in supporting the startups. What we would like to do is to somehow support corporates that then can create market for startups. So we do assess the corporate risk, and then we are also supporting startups with new instruments that we are issuing, but we want to make sure that they have sort of solid business basis to progress on. And just to comment on what the European Investment Banking has been saying before, I mean, as a European citizen, I'm proud of what the European Bank and the European institutions are doing in this field. I think that the European Investment Bank has to be seen as a sort of really market mover and leader in creating the opportunities and the mindset for startuppers, emerging innovators, investors, and corporate entrepreneurs to understand that this is the way where we should go. And of course, finance has to be seen as enabling rather than a blocking factor.
Okay. Thank you. Any more questions here? Juha?
Just ask from an entrepreneur point of view. So what sort of collateral and balance sheet or cash flow you're looking to make a project fundable?
Really depends. First of all, when we look at startups, of course, we need to look at the team and we look at what is the sort of business purpose that they have. I make an example. We are somehow sometimes surrounded by cases where there is a new product which has been somehow designed out of a waste stream, which is okay, it's still legitimate. But a very quick question that we do make ourselves is, what is the market for that kind of product? I mean, what is the needed which has been addressed by the entrepreneur trying to design that product? So we want to reverse somehow the question, because otherwise we are still, of course, financing some startups, or supporting the startups. But those business models may rely on a very short-sighted kind of approach. We want to see actually the reverse approach. We would like to see what is, from a business perspective, a new market which could be addressed, and then, of course, could be supplied with initiatives and progress that do have secondary raw materials as a source of production.
Okay. There was a question about, how much of the 5 billion has been deployed, if you can disclose, and what's the biggest barrier in the deployment that you face?
Yes. Just to clarify, the 5 billion euros have been deployed across the strategic span of the timing of the strategic plan, which is 2018 to 2021. As yesterday, we announced a big transaction closed in London. Is 175 million pound, 200 euros millions. And of course, I mean, we have a conservative approach, so I can share that is going well. The approach and the success from our side would not be to be, at the end of this process, being able to deploy all the 5 billions, but actually to be able to ignite the sort of transformation. And so one of the barriers, just because, of course, the pricing for this plafond is pretty attractive in terms of discount and basis points, what is our mission is not to focus on the pricing, is to focus on the strategicness of this approach. I don't have to finance something which would have supported without the plafond. So I need to make sure that with our colleagues, we are able to support the project leader in going one step forward. And once this is achieved, usually this encompasses a conversation being held with other actors along the value chain, upstream, downstream, because what is realized is that the opportunity of improvement, the rising of the bar, which is being pursued, is actually an opportunity for other actors along the same sort of value chain. And so it's a barrier, but also is a great opportunity because we have the chance to somehow evolve the approach that is already being taken.
Okay, thank you, Max. Long answer. Okay, applause for Max. before I give the 5 minutes to Aaron, we've gotten a lot of questions on what type of projects the investors are looking, who you are present here in the panel. So after everyone has had the 5 minutes, I'll just give a word of warning that I'll give a chance for everyone one more time to pitch, who should come talk to you after this panel, so that it doesn't come as a surprise. So now please welcome Aaron.
There are 3 things I want to leave you with today after the next 10 minutes, and then we'll talk a little bit about project finance. The first is that the circular economy is here right now. That's fairly obvious to everybody in this room who came to Helsinki for a conference about it. But equally importantly, it always has been. If you look back at indigenous cultures, the history of humankind, everybody was practicing the circular economy thousands of years ago, and we really only started to create waste when we started taking more than we needed. And so what we're doing now and going back to the circular economy, it's in our nature, and we can do it. And in a way, we're sort of returning to our ancestral roots in order to safely shepherd ourselves into the future. Second thing is that the circular economy is incredibly profitable. 5 to 10 years ago, if you went into a large corporation and you said, I want to have a conversation with you about sustainability, the person you were talking to would roll their eyes and wonder how much your consulting was going to cost them, and it looked like a profit or a cost center. Today, when you walk into a major corporation anywhere in the world and you start talking about the circular economy, you're talking to the CFO, you're talking to the CEO, you're talking about profitability. And it really has to be that way because some of the industries that we're talking about changing right now are hundreds of years old. These are linear systems that have been in place for multi-generations. And in order to shift that pattern, all those patterns, all those intertwined interests, it has to be profitable for everybody involved. The third thing, and this applies mostly to the United States, is that we need more women in this industry. The Scandinavian countries do a very good job of this. In the United States, that's not so. And if you think about it, Mother Earth cannot be healed by men alone. So getting more women into this industry is very important. So let's talk a little bit about project finance and what we do at Ultra Capital. So what is the opportunity that we see? There are really 3 main drivers of it. The first is that there is pressure on fundamental resources. We have bumped into or crossed the planetary boundaries on almost every single resource we're extracting and using right now. The second is that there is a trend towards smaller scale modular infrastructure across the board. The days of multi-billion-dollar monolithic coal-fired power plants are over. And in particular, where we live, there's a gap in funding. There's a lot of venture capital, there's a little bit of growth equity, and then there are banks willing to loan hundreds of millions of dollars, but there's no one providing capital in the range of $5 to $100 million to build projects in this sector. There's a trend right now in the United States, confluence of 3 major factors. One is that electricity is becoming less expensive, so to produce anything is becoming cheaper. Second is that the disposal of waste is becoming more expensive. That is in the form of landfills banning organic waste. You can no longer dump organic waste into landfills in the United States. Livestock manure is polluting the waterways. That's a global problem. There are 30 billion livestock animals on the planet right now. Electronics are polluting the planet. Plastics are everywhere. And the third thing is that waste is becoming more valuable. So technology is now enabling us to break down waste and repurpose it into forms that are far more valuable than just combusting it. This is project finance. This is what a project finance structure looks like. The box in the upper middle is the project itself. It's not a company, it's not a startup, it's a standalone legal entity that is the project. It's the facility that's consuming food waste and turning it into electricity, or taking livestock manure and turning it into gas, or taking construction waste and turning it back into construction materials. You need to have contracts around the entire project, so you need to have your supply agreements stabilized, you need to have the offtake, what you're going to do with the product signed, and you need to have an engineering firm that's going to build it, you need to have somebody who's going to operate it. All of these agreements need to be in place before you break ground on your project. There's a lot of work that gets done up front, but this sets it up to be a 20 or 30-year project. This is a picture of the solar curve. 10 years ago, solar projects were returning 3 times what they return today. The same thing will happen in a lot of industries in the circular economy. We live in the upper left here, where we try to get there early and ride this return wave down. This slide didn't come through properly. This is we'll skip that. This is one of our projects. We pulled it out of Poland. It's called the Red River Biorefinery. It takes 500,000 tons a year of agriculture waste, mostly sugar beets and potato waste, and turns it into biofuel. So compared to a corn ethanol plant where you are pouring a lot of fertilizer and water into the soil, this is taking a waste stream that otherwise would turn into atmospheric methane and turning into renewable biofuel for transportation. This is another one of our projects. It's in Maine. It's called Fiberite. It takes a single stream of municipal solid waste. So this is rather than multiple bins and trying to get everybody to put their waste in the right bins, everybody can put all their waste in one bin rather than that waste being landfilled. We use optical sorters and advanced technologies to strip out all the metals for recycling, all the cellulosic material for repurposing, and the plastics are compressed for fuel. We can divert anywhere between 60 to 80% of that waste stream out of landfill and put it back into the economy. Thank you.
So I'll start with the question from the audience that, we obviously like to do a lot of copycatting here in Europe in terms of, what has been invented in the US. So if you would need to choose, so what type of infra projects could we actually copycat from the US in Europe? So what would you recommend us to focus on? What would be interesting? What are your learnings and your views on that?
So, in full disclosure, one of the reasons I'm here is because I think the European industries are actually farther along than the U.S., and so we're actually looking to bring European companies into the U.S. market. One of the challenges in the United States is that there is a lot of land and a lot of holes in the ground, and so waste disposal is a lot easier than in Europe, where you can't get away with it. It's actually more expensive in Europe. So, we're looking for technologies to come this way, but there are advanced agriculture applications that are, particularly in robotics, that are coming out of the US into Europe that are going to be very interesting.
Okay. Any questions from panelists or comments actually to Aaron on this one or the presentation? Juha?
Just a question, do you have any consumer applications or is it pure industrial?
It's mostly industrial. The average project that we finance is about $40 million in size. It's typically takes 100,000 tons of food waste and turns that into 3 megawatts of electricity. So we really focus on that industrial scale infrastructure.
Okay, the next question deals with returns. So if you can a little bit talk about the types of returns that the circular economy projects do make.
So we target a mid-teens return on capital over the course of 10 to 20 years of the life of the project. So unlike a bank where you're looking at a single-digit high interest rate or a private equity firm that's 20, 30% returns, we're in that middle range. And we are a project equity fund, so we're actually not a lender. We finance the project, 100% of the project, and then we co-own that with the developer for the life of the facility, hopefully 20 or 30 years.
Okay. And the next question would be, and how much and how do you weigh in higher value approaches? For example, agro-waste into energy versus new products.
Say that again?
Yeah, so how much and how do you weigh in higher value approaches? For example, agro-waste into energy fuel versus new products.
So in our business in project finance, we're not set up to take technology risk or first-time commercial scale risk. That's venture capital money. So we finance projects that are proven and referenceable. The one I showed you, the Red River Biorefinery, is actually out of Poland. So the original facility was built in Łódź, and we copied it and brought it over to the United States.
Okay, and next one, it's a difficult one. So what are some jobs that don't exist today you hope to see in the circular economy space? So where is this going? What type of jobs will emerge?
Well, so one thing I would say is that a lot of our projects are in rural areas where there's heavy agriculture and manufacturing, and we actually do create good, high-paying, long-term jobs in those communities. On average, the average salary at our projects is 2 or 3 times the local per capita income, and we're creating these jobs for decades at a time. I think in many ways, the circular economy and the advancements of technology is going to be a major issue for society. Robotics alone will displace in the United States 3 to 5 million lower income workers who drive trucks and work cash registers, and those people are entirely unemployable otherwise. So there are a lot of challenges coming. But from the projects that we're financing, we're hoping to create good, stable, long-term jobs in communities that would otherwise not have that form of employment.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Aaron. And next, Juha.
Hello. Hey, I'm Juha Koponen. I'm the co-founder with Swap.com. And we go for the clothing and apparel market. And that's a very linear market right now. So it's 85% of the clothing that people don't use that goes into landfills in the US. In the Europe, it's 75% that gets burned for heat. A little bit goes still to landfills as well. But there is a $100 billion opportunity in the US, another $100 billion euro opportunity in pre-owned clothing. So we go for that. And we are an online consignment store for pre-owned items. We operate in the US. How it works is that our sellers, they put their items they don't need into a box, ship it to us. We'll go through the box, we'll see if we can accept the item, we check for the quality, we photograph them, then we list their data, the size and brand and so forth. And then our customers come to our site, swap.com. They can enjoy the big selection. It's a huge selection, over 1 million items, great prices, and we serve them very fast. And one of our customers said that, yeah, this is like an Amazon, but it's just cheaper, you have more selection in clothing. Well, great. And we have offices here in Helsinki, development, and then Woodridge near Chicago for our operations. We launched 2013, raised over 50 million in funding, so a good amount. And it's a sizable operation. We sold about 8 million pieces already, and calculating that it's a saving of 200,000 tons of CO2 if those weren't purchased as new. And what we really have been focusing is to develop an industrial-scale operation for pre-owned item, especially clothing processing. Because now we are touching the product. We need to have people there to do this work, but we need to be very, very efficient in doing this. And I can brag that we are probably the most efficient in the world here. Then there are things like we're using machine learning, automatic neural networks to identify what parameters the product has directly from the pictures. All right, now going to the actual topic, so the challenges and learnings. So we've been growing fast. We were among the 5 fastest growing clothing retailers in the US, 2016. We've been going for the next step, investing to the growth, but sometimes we were doing that with negative gross margins as well. So we burned a good amount of money. About a year ago, we saw that we need to stop this and do something else and actually get to the profitability. So we had to make a turnaround, included layoffs, included savings in all fronts. And we changed our commercial model with the sellers as well, many other things. We also moved to a smaller facility. It's still pretty large, though. But the good thing is that now gross margins are well positive, growing with and turning profitable this year. Also raising then some amount of funding, which is we don't need as much as we used to do. Then, going to the learnings and challenges. I have like 4 points here. So one is this, that the real world problems require scale, and I come from building this up ourselves. And the costs big money, and then you need to be aware with your team that how much risk can you take, you and your team. That's the first thing. Second one is that the commercial investor will not fund solving the sustainability issue. That's just what it is. They are in business of making money. And okay, they will fund very eagerly then the business case and the market opportunity that these circular economies present. So that's the good thing. But these things need to be separated very clearly by the entrepreneur. Because if you then come to the moment that, okay, I need more money, it's not your circular economy thing that will save you, but it's your business case which will save you. Okay, and then doing good helps. Like we heard, there's lots of impact investment companies coming, so you actually can get to the focus of companies with this. But on the other hand, you then will compete lots of non-circular, like normal businesses, are very scalable, have very good profits. And you just need to, and this is a plus, a little bit plus for you with some companies, and with some companies just don't care. But it's good to understand that. The final fourth point is that when you align your business with the sustainability goal, then you can sleep well and sell more, because then you're doing one more good thing. And it's always when you start to monetize your thing, there's always the idea that, okay, let's do this or that, and there's the temptation to go to the dark side, if I say. Well, okay, those are the 4 learnings. Thank you.
We have a lot of questions for you, Juha. Be prepared. Anything from the panel before I go to the audience-driven ones? Okay, so maybe personal question first. I think, so how have you used your background as a data scientist when working at swap.com?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I'm a PhD with nuclear physics turned to a clothing salesman. Short story. But I guess, I mean, I found the enjoyment in developing all these things, like the technology, and we're in e-commerce where you need to look lots of data. What is selling, what marketing methods work, and what products do the customer need. So it's actually, there's lots of this in the daily work.
Everyday work?
Every day, all the time.
Okay, good. So next question is that you currently only work in the US, so what about Europe? When are you coming?
Good question. Yes, we would like to do it at some point. Of course, it's a big investment, and we need to get like the US thing, stand on its own things, and when the time is right, definitely we want to do it. But
okay, so what happens with the clothing after you sold it to your customers? So what do you do with the unsold ones?
Well, unsold ones, what we've seen is that compared to the physical store, we can actually keep the product on the site much longer. It's in the racking you saw. It can stay there for a longer period of time. Of course, at some point, it makes probably sense to sell it to somebody. And this is good quality clothing that if we would sell it to somebody, it would be basically to the like a physical store, thrift stores and places like this. There is a big industry of people who sort this clothing stream to different sort of things. One part goes to recycling. There is then the export market, but then there is actually increasing physical store chain where it goes.
Okay, so what about if you would do swap.com in a new domain rather than clothes? What would the new domain be?
Can you please repeat?
So if swap.com would be brought to another domain, another industry, so not clothing, what would that domain be?
That domain, well, it probably would be a domain, I don't know if it should be different, but it's, well, you just, getting a domain is expensive or hard, so I don't know.
Okay, that was too difficult.
So it's
okay.
a very tactical question, I think.
So what is the difference to traditional old cloth collection besides the traditional model shipping the clothes to low-income countries?
Well, I mean, I guess now what we are doing and seeing is that we are actually capturing some of that product which used to go to those countries and putting it back to the US consumer. And I think that can happen in Europe as well, when you can present the products in a way that the consumer can see, okay, this is my size, this is the brand I want. There is lots of good stuff there, but the problem has been before that in the physical thrift store, it doesn't always look nice. Some of them do look very nice, I say that, but not always. And then you can't find what you need. The size wasn't the right and so forth. So I guess that's the, if I'm responding that well.
Okay, I have one more question. So let's say I put this dress to be recycled. So, the items, how many times do they return? So, let's say do you guys know that, this is the third time or the fifth time or the sixth time?
Sometimes we do, but I mean, there is no like a unique identifier in the clothing. I mean, we can say from the pictures that with the systems we have that this is the same than that, but really saying that, okay, it's the same exact item, we don't know. Okay, if we know that we sold you the one and you send it back, then we sort of can know it. We are seeing those items coming back sometimes, and then we sell it. I even bought the shirt, and then I showed it to my wife and said, I was selling this in swap.com, and now you bought it. So.
Okay. Okay, one more for you. So, talk a little bit about the competition. So how do you see the competition?
There is competition, especially in the luxury goods, and because I mean if your unit price is like $100 or $500, then you don't need to put the effort in the actual processing of those. And then there are good companies in the, let's say, $20 to $50 segment. We are at around the mass market, where there's actually the biggest quantity in about $10 segment. And we don't see much competition there. One reason is that it's hard to process those items profitably.
Yes. Okay. Thank you, Juha. Wonderful. Big hand. So then we have a few minutes to close the panel. So, I would like you guys to, pitch a little bit what type of projects and people you'd like to meet after the panel. So, you had something in mind when you joined the forum and joined the panel. So maybe starting from Ditte and then going around. So, what's an ideal outcome after this panel?
That's a good question. I think overall I've already been very pleased with a lot of the things that I've heard and how much is going on and how many people are working towards circularity. I think a key interest for me is the mix between design and production. So on the one side, how do we have this resource recovery of our waste and turn it into new products upstream via design? And how, on the other end, do we design for circularity in terms of a cross-process product and business model so that we really have longevity in mind when we design at the get-go? So that mix is for me a key interest and something that I've already been positively surprised by while here, but hope to see more of.
Thank you. Juha?
Well, I mean, always happy to talk with the investors who are keen to look into this space, but also to talk with the entrepreneurs who are in different stages of their, just have a chat.
Okay, so your competence can be borrowed.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's always good to hear what people are doing. I think I learned something out of that, and if I can give a good hint, it's nice.
Thank you. Aaron?
We get involved with our developers 2 to 3 years before we close a deal with them. We try to get there very early and help guide them towards what a project looks like. So that leads us to keep a very close eye on the technology sector and the technologies that are driving a lot of waste conversion in the world right now. So we're always looking for innovation around upcycling and the breakdown and reuse of materials. And that's obviously something that's prospering here in Finland and Scandinavia.
Max?
I think we are pretty excited to meet with brilliant minds, be them entrepreneurs, investors, or companies, devoted to make a positive impact to the business that they do.
Okay, then Lisbeth.
Well, yes, we are the investment bank, the European Investment Bank, so we are also keen to talking to other investors and other banks to see how we can work together in developing new tools. But we are also interested in companies, small or big. If you're smaller, we can help you to look for the right funding, the right financing. We have our innovative finance advisory team. They are also here, but you can also contact them online. So, and also bigger companies to explore, or even business associations to see if we can develop programs together with them.
Thank you. 2 sets of applause. I'll give you guidelines. First sets of applause actually to Daniel and Jyri, who put the session together. Woo-hoo! An even bigger set of applause to the great panelists and speakers of today. Woo! And thank you for the excellent questions, everyone. This is it. More salsa.